Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
The 22nd session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is taking place in person from 17 to 20th April 2023 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. At UN headquarters in New York. The theme of this year's session is Indigenous Peoples, Human Health, Planetary and Territorial Health, and Climate Change, a rights-based approach. Like previous years, Cultural Survival is attending the session, organizing a series of events and meeting with Indigenous delegates and UN member state representatives. We asked Indigenous women leaders attending session to share some of the pressing issues affecting in their communities.
My name is Lokawa Margaret. I'm from Uganda, Indigenous peoples called Karimjong. I'm the member of Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Of course, as you know that MREP is a subsidiary body of Human Rights Council, whose main one of the issues that it does is to advise the Human Rights Council on issues pertaining Indigenous women and, of course, Indigenous peoples. And one of the key interests I've ever had once I became a member of MREP was to advocate for the issues of Indigenous women. And, of course, we know that Indigenous women suffer multiple times in terms of human rights violations more than men. And in that case, the issues faced by Indigenous women worldwide is one of it is marginalization, lack of participation on decision making that affects their rights, and of course their rights in most ways are highly, affected. And second, and another issue of Indigenous women is that in most cases they lack basic to information, and actually they are not aware of their rights, if I would say. And of course, in this case, we and members of MREP and also other Indigenous peoples want to ensure that Indigenous women's rights, first of all, are observed, and they should be part and parcel of the participation on issues that affect their rights, ranging from climate change, ranging from traditional knowledge. And of course, now we have got issues of Indigenous languages, which we know that women are custodians of traditional knowledge, and so if they are not involved in this kind of discussions and in this kind of participation, then we are losing most of the world Indigenous knowledges. I have been a member of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues before becoming a member of MREP, and of course, knowing that the UN Permanent Forum also is part of the ECOSOC, whose main objectives is to address and advocate on the issues of Indigenous peoples, of course inclusive women. Now, in my own observation and in the current trend and in the sessions that I have attended, of course there have been a lot of recommendations that have been taken to address the plight of Indigenous women. And in these recommendations, it is now up to the states, because what the Permanent Forum and MREP does is both to advise on the recommendations that have been brought up by Indigenous women, and it's up to the states now. Of course, we know that Indigenous peoples live within states. Now, if there are some states that have, for example, adopted the UN DRIP in their legislation and, of course, taken up with issues of Indigenous women, there are some states like Africa who are still rigid. They don't recognize the existence of Indigenous people and in such Indigenous women, and for them they think that Indigenous women want those special rights, which is not the case. What Indigenous women and Indigenous people are asking is just for them to be accorded that kind of respect, for them to be given space, for them to be included in the decision making, for them to say, look, in a decision that is taken in our lands, please, we must be consulted, and that is epic. So they should always be, asked. They should always be involved. And in this case, this has been a very big challenge. What I would want to implore is that I will, as an Indigenous woman, continue to advocate for the rights of Indigenous women at all levels, and it is my imperative request that all of us as a collective must make sure that Indigenous rights are respected, and of course it is Indigenous people who are always at the center of development. It is Indigenous women who are the custodian of traditional knowledge. It is Indigenous women who know ideas and knowledge on how to curb the mitigation of climate change. It is Indigenous women who are mothers and custodians of our environment.
For more on Indigenous rights, visit www.cs.org/rights. You also can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages.